Good afternoon, Mike Winkler here. Rather than talk about QRadar features and functions, I wanted to talk a little bit about running it and once you get going. And one of the most common problems, unfortunately, is I got 500 offenses, what now? So I wanted to talk through kind of the best way to get your hands on it, what I'm calling triage here. But before we get to what goes wrong, let's talk about what goes right and what it should look like, right? So what is the right number of offenses? In a perfect world, it's going to be 10 to 15. They come in, we research them, we close them, right? We fix the problems. Some will be held over and take a while, but generally they will stay on one page, which is under 40. And 40 is high even for a reasonable number, right? Maybe for some of the real large teams, but you'll find most of the time you want to stay between 10 and 15 as they pop up, as they close, as they open. Unfortunately, this is not the world we live in, right? What we tend to see really pretty often, I won't go so far as majority, but I'll say pretty often, is people that have pages upon pages of offenses. Now, this causes two problems very quickly. One of which is I have never met a human being that can tear through 30 pages of offenses. In this case, I've got 5 pages and 170 items, and no one's going to go through all those, right? By the time you get to the ones on page 6, they're going to be obsolete. So we need to deal with these in a more timely fashion, right? This requires getting organized. Triage, of course, is a medical term for you treat the patients that you can save right now, you make the ones wait who can wait, and some of which you know you can't save, you handle that way, right? So if we look at this in terms of QRadar triage, and hopefully we won't have anyone we can't save, I'm going to say that there's 4 kinds of offenses. There are things that are a straight line emergency. I have remote access logins succeeding. I have worms that are active. There are some offenses that appear that should cause you to jump up and get out of your chair. By and large, that main offense window should be full of these, right? Something to say, oh man, I got a worm right now that's stealing from me right now. Okay, so this is the number that should be there, and there should be between 10 and 15. There's those that require investigation. Why do I have Windows file sharing going on with 3 foreign countries? Maybe I've got offices there. Maybe I've got a vendor that works out there. I got a guy on vacation doing work for me. I don't know, but this does require looking at. Is this a leap out of your chair? No, not precisely, but it's nothing you want to leave sitting forever either. Okay, there is the policy and risk ones, and these are often a little harder to define. So if we say, for example, I have excessive firewall denies between hosts, I have excessive traffic, I have a script I know that's been running for 2 years for a server that doesn't exist anymore that's generating junk traffic. So that we have to take these decisions like, why is there so much rejected flow traffic? We have to go to management and say, is this an accepted risk, an acceptable risk, or is it something we need to change, right? So it takes longer, and it's a very different process than an investigation, which is technical. This is a question of what do we want the network to look like and what can we change? And the last category is just a tuning error. In this case, I dug up one that says, oh no, someone's letting viruses go by. Hey, we found a virus and we left it. There's going to be places where either your QRadar is tuned wrong or the data sources going to QRadar are tuned wrong. And if you look at it in these rough categories, right? Things you jump out of your chair for, things you as a network guy do have to go chase down, things as an employee you have to bring to your manager's attention, and things you need to do to your application, right? Tuning errors and investigations can be close, but they shouldn't be exactly the same thing. So if we look at our QRadar and getting our handle around the great big pile of offenses, I'm going to make a couple of suggestions about how we can do that and get back in the business of doing security analytics and out of the business of kind of being the data librarian. First of all, I'm going to ask you to create 2 users. I'm calling one research and one risk management. The reason for this is I want to be able to assign offenses out of that main window to those users. Okay, so what this means is when I assign an offense to a user, now for example, I'm assigning myself a couple of WannaCries, that they're going to disappear from the main window, so I, Mike Winkler, can go through and say, oh, okay, I've got to go find it where the WannaCry is and clean that crap up. Okay, it's going to disappear from the main window so that when we're making decisions on what to do, someone's already working on it. Now we can set these things so that if they don't get addressed, we can have follow-up going on. But this is going to remove the distractions of the things you're already working on from the incoming data. Okay, but what makes this interesting is more than just assigning to individual users. is I want to assign to those users like needs research and risk management, so that when we go through and we see offenses come in and I'm like, oh my God, that's a terrible network problem. It's been going on for a month. I'm going to call it, instead of an investigation, it's a risk management. So instead of going to the network guys and say, you really need to clean that up, you go to management and you say, do we really need to clean that up? Because if we do, I will just tune it out. Okay, so the gist here, right, is I've got 4 goals for us. I want to keep the security offenses clearly in view, minimum number. We cannot, in a timely fashion, respond to security offenses if we don't know about them. I want to keep track of investigation-worthy events. Now, a lot of the time, investigation-worthy events are just that. It's something that things aren't run particularly well, configured particularly well, but sometimes they are going to filter back down and become security events because we didn't realize what we were looking at first. Security events, we get up and solve. Investigation, we got to put some time in. And I'm not saying you should close investigation-worthy events, but send them over to this kind of separate user so that I can always tap into that needs investigation window, and it's going to keep track of all of my goals and what's going on. Risk management, it's roughly the same thing, right? Because you're going to have to show the bosses at one point or another why they're going to need to make this decision. And if they say, oh, well, that's okay that that firewall does that, or that's a cranky old app and it generates scans, that you tune that offense out, you put it's as of Lori Wynn, and that's why we're doing it, so that you're covered as a technician and the organization is covered as all the policy is documented inside QRadar. The last one is tuning errors. Let's just put them all in a user so that when we're going through and we're doing our tuning, we don't have to reinvestigate them because we're not sure if they're investigation or security offenses or whatever. We know they're just tuning errors, right? We're trying to make this kind of easy for you. Now, I'm going to show you some tools in just a minute here, right, that are going to make this hopefully as easy for you as possible to do. But if you take this philosophy and say, look, my security offenses need them on page 1, that's great. Things I'm doing for myself, I've got it on my own page. Also cool. Investigation separate from management, tuning in its own place. You're going to find very quickly you're going to get from that 5 pages, 170 offenses, down to a more manageable number and something you can go through, you can take care of on a day-to-day basis. And if you have to let the investigation one sit a little longer, or the tuning one sit a little longer, because you only have so many hours in the day, well, that's one of those triage decisions we make, but it allows us to keep track of our security events while we're working our way through cleaning up our environment. Okay, here's some tools to help you get there. There is the QRadar tuning app. If you are not using this, you should be. It makes things terrifically easier. So I went through and ran the tuning app on my own server, and it showed me the breakdowns of what type of offenses I have, including a really large number of data transfer and Windows errors received. I cut that off a little bit on my graphic there. Okay, and I can drill into any one of those, and it will allow me to edit the rule, okay, based on what it's seeing here. So you can always go through in QRadar and edit the rules and make changes, but what the tuning assistant does, or excuse me, the tuning app, is it's going to go through and it's going to say, hey, my biggest problem is these weird data transfer errors that I'm seeing all the time. Here's the rule that's on that. Did you want me to modify the rule? So that when you're going through and you're trying to tune down what's a false positive, what's a network error, this should be a great tool to help you get there. Next, I want to talk about the Network Hierarchy Manager. So what this is, and this is something that it's gonna look like in coming attractions, right? Next year, your Network Hierarchy Manager is gonna look like this. It is just a tool that makes things easier than the traditional one. So I can enable and disable log sources, I can bulk edit, I can bulk alter them, so that if I have to make changes in the log sources, it's going to be easier than the way we do it with the old style interface. It's just a nice tool. Okay, and there's already a video out there about the QRadar Assistant app. If you haven't seen it, you should. If you aren't using it, you should be. Guys, I am Mike Winkler, and this has been a short message on how to get your QRadar under control.